Hi, welcome to the Photoshop Essential Skills podcast. In this image we can see that a motion blur filter has been applied to the top layer and is being masked by this layer mask. If we switch off the layer you can see the car is stationary in a car park, and then the motion blur gives the sense of movement. But if we zoom in we can see there are still a couple of things that need to be in motion as well, and that is the wheels here. We can't apply the linear motion blur filter, we need to apply a radial motion blur. Okay, and so this can be a little bit tricky to do inside of Photoshop, so I thought I'd take the opportunity to show you how to do this particular task. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a selection of this wheel. I'm going to use a elliptical marquee tool to do this, and then simply click and drag over this wheel to make a selection of this area. As I'm clicking and dragging I can float this selection by holding down the spacebar key, and so I can move this into a better alignment for the wheel that I'm trying to select. If your ellipse needs to be turned slightly, then we can do that by going up to the Select menu and choosing Transform Selection, and that allows us to twist or rotate the selection slightly and also move it into position. I'm using the keyboard arrow keys just to nudge this over to the left slightly, and I'll commit that transformation of the selection. What we're going to do now is we're going to paste the wheel onto its own layer. And so we're going to use the copy merged command rather than the copy. Okay, this is going to copy the visible pixels rather than the pixels that are just on this layer, which are actually blurred, so would give us no advantage there. And then we're going to go back to the edit menu and choose paste, so they get pasted into a new layer. Okay, and what we're going to do now is we're going to apply the radial blur filter to this one. If we just apply this without doing any further action, the radial blur isn't going to be very realistic, and so in order to get a realistic effect we're going to have to load these pixels as a selection. And to do that I'm going to hold down the command key on a Mac or the control key on a PC and just click this layer to load that as a selection. And then we're going to come up to the Edit menu and choose Free Transform. This time we're transforming the pixels and not the selection. And what we're going to do is we're going to have to try and render this as a circle rather than an ellipse, and that's because the radial blur doesn't really work on ellipses that well. Okay, it's always going to look like an artificial blur. Okay, so we're going to try and create a square from these pixels in the bounding box, and that's a complete circle for the pixels themselves. And then we're going to commit that transformation, and then we're going to apply the radial blur filter to these pixels. So we'll go Filter, Blur, or Radial Blur. We don't need to center this because we have an active selection which ensures the radial blur is centered around that selection. We're going to have to sort of second guess how much blur is appropriate for this particular wheel because we don't get a preview inside the filter itself, and we're working on the spin rather than the zoom, and then we're selecting OK, and there we've got the quite effective radial blur there. All the thing that we have to do now of course is to put it back into the ellipse shape. So again we're going to come to the free transform, Command T or Control T, and then pop that back into its original ellipse shape. Now in order to get perfect alignment, these pixels are actually 100% opaque, so we can't actually see the underlying wheel, but we can come over to the opacity on this layer and just drop the opacity so we can see as we drag this smaller when those two images are going to line up, so we don't get a misshapen wheel there. And we've got a good alignment there, so we'll put the opacity back to 100% and commit that transformation, and from the Select menu choose Deselect. And so there's my spinning wheel, quite effectively achieved. Just a little bit of a dog leg step there in order to get to that approach, but again quite effective and certainly a lot easier than jacking the car up and spinning the wheel and photographing it in situ. The supporting DVD that is included with the book has over 10 hours of movie tutorials, high resolution JPEG, TIFF and RAW images to support all of your imaging projects, multi-layered Photoshop files of all of the completed projects, a stock library of royalty-free images, actions and presets to enhance your editing workflow. The book is available from Amazon.com or Amazon.co.uk.